Before we launch in, I just thought for those who have joined us that don't know anything about Ausdrill, I'll just give you a quick overview of what our business does in our group of companies. So we're listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. We're in the top 200 businesses in Australia. As part of our group, we have 16 integrated mining services businesses across 8 different countries, and we employ just over 4,000 people across the group. We service the full mining life cycle through exploration, mine development, surface and underground mining, manufacturing, energy and infrastructure. So it's quite a diverse business. There's 3 pillars to our business, in mostly the drilling services that operates predominantly in Australia. We've got our contract mining services, which are predominantly in Africa through surface mining and underground mining. And we have our equipment services and supplies. So we deal a lot with earth moving, fleet hire and sales, supply and logistics that services our businesses worldwide. We believe we've got certain edges in our business compared to our competitors, with our main focus is on innovation and automation, and we deliver a flexible and adaptable service offering to our clients. And we believe the finance and the procurement function in our space is best in breed with our focus on that. We are Australia's largest exploration and production drilling company, and we are Africa's largest complete mining services provider. We're also one of Australia's leading suppliers of mining equipment, parts, sales and rentals. The way that our business works as we see it in the procurement and finance space is we've got sort of 3 elements to our business: safety, production, operations and maintenance, and our finance and procurement. So we've classed ourselves as together in our circle, and which has led us to really needing to work together on our goals and targets. I'll hand over to you, Ashley, to talk about our the old regime and then what we were trying to achieve.
Yeah, so sort of historically, Ausdrill we're a very decentralised business. It's grown rapidly over the last 10 years through, obviously organically, but there's been a lot of acquisition as well, and generally with acquisition comes sort of a disjointed sort of setup. So obviously there's always a pathway to integrating the businesses, but that can take some time, especially in a boom cycle. You're sort of more focused on operational outcomes than consolidation of business units. So sort of when I came into the business, back 7 or 8 years ago, it was very, very much everyone for themselves. Each business had its focus on its own goals. The services within the business were completely detached from the other services amongst the group. So you really had 17 independent companies with its own solid services departments operating autonomously from one another. So it was obviously it worked for the business at the time to a point. There was no real measurements of what it was costing the businesses, so they sort of didn't focus on how to obviously improve that. So it was my job and Renee's job to sort of come in, look at that, look at where there could be efficiencies gained through a more consolidated approach, and obviously that's where we headed towards. So we had obviously a paper-based requisitioning system, which meant that people in the field, all purchase orders were basically generated off a paper written requisition. So very inefficient in the way that obviously details were scant. There was a lot of rework because obviously the interpretation of what was written down didn't necessarily always end up being what was put into the system, and there was a lot of inefficiencies built into that naturally due to the way it's sort of set up. Purchase order numbers were sort of run through. It was a very sort of fly by the seat of your pants sort of setup. So an operator in the field could ring a vendor and basically just quote his name as a purchase order. And obviously that when that comes back to finance to pay the bill, there's no traceability, there's no system-generated order. So once again, more rework generated, which is built-in sort of inefficiencies all the way through. So that would have to go back through the system again, which would double the amount of work that would take if we did it properly from the start. We had 56 buyers amongst the group companies, the 17 companies, and obviously being a siloed setup, you couldn't have one buyer in a company because you've got to account for leave and you've got to account for sick days. So one always meant two, and when you had 1.5 that were busy, you needed 3, and so on and so forth. So that just generated inefficiencies in itself. So there was no backing up amongst the businesses. There was no sort of cross-pollination between employees. So it really was everyone out for themselves, which obviously resulted in us having a very large number of people working at that transactional level. And look, there was varying levels of skills in that. Obviously, in a boom cycle, you don't necessarily have access to a really robust skill base. So a lot of people moved into these roles from sort of, totally unrelated positions in the past. So once again, that sort of builds in inefficiencies because they're not really procurement people. They're more just transactional level staff who don't really understand, obviously, procurement. And the results of the business were pretty inefficient buying. We had 24 accounts payable staff, and once again, the same rules applied. You couldn't have one; you needed to have 2, because there was always backup for that one. So once again, you sort of get that inefficiency built in just purely through that. Obviously, automation didn't exist at all. There was no. We used to get 60% of our invoices were classed as non-compliant, so they'd roll back through. And I think we were at the height, we were producing over 100,000 invoices. So you can imagine the amount of rework that was created out of that. There was 4 or 5 inch high stacks of invoices coming back on a monthly basis to go back through and obviously be analysed and corrected. So a massive amount of work goes into that, and that was probably the catalyst, one of the key starting points for us to look at automation, just to try and solve that issue.
We also had, we mapped it out, we had 35 or 36 different invoice variations. So from partially receipted, partially invoiced, back orders that were never actually delivered, and there was a lot of variables around that. So we had to account for that in whatever solution that we went forward with.
And obviously the automation piece started by just looking at what was around the market, what other companies were doing. So we originally went to a procurement conference and looked at the Alcoa model, and they were probably the forefront of procurement automation across the globe. So they presented their, obviously their journey, the way they went through, what they did, the outcomes. Obviously, I think they'd had their orders down to about $2.50 an order, the cost to generate an order about $2.50. Ours was sitting at about $86 at the time. So we saw that as where we wanted to be, and obviously that commenced the journey as to how we get there. So we basically built a discovery team to start with, of 4 people. So we had a head of finance, we had a business-related finance person, a head of IT, and a head of procurement. So we built a panel. So it was it wasn't one arm of the business making a decision for the others. It was basically all working together to meet an outcome that sort of met all business needs, not just procurement, not just finance, and not just IT. So our focus was not to have IT necessarily intimately involved in the whole process, but obviously this being an IT solution, they still had a part to play in the selection process. And obviously, insourcing versus outsourcing was a big consideration, and we're still going through that. That's the next stage. So initially, automation needs to be achieved before you can really look at insourcing and outsourcing, because in our organisation anyway, because obviously to outsource an inefficient workflow, you're just basically going to make it worse. So, obviously ease of use was another big factor in our selection process. We basically wanted a software solution that could work for the guys in the field. And now we've got people who are illiterate out in the field who know how to operate a drill rig really, really well. But often these guys don't necessarily have a great education behind them. So we needed a software solution that was very visual. Guys could pick goods off pictures, and obviously so sight for them is a major thing. They can see the product in front of them, and we needed them to be able to see that product in the system through an iPad interface, or a laptop interface, or even a phone interface. So the ease of use was very, very important for us. So without ease of use, we wouldn't get the uptake in the field, and then obviously that would stymie our automation push. So,
not that we knew it at the time, but that became the most critical point to us resetting how we were going to buy items and services.
Absolutely, and that's a major thing. We've got to get requisition to invoice, the full cost benefit. We needed that. We needed the guys in the field to be electronically requisitioning. So interactive was the main thing as well. Obviously, we've had a big push behind the development of our tools, and procurement's one part of it, but the actual user, the end user, is the most critical element of getting the procurement tool to work right. If you don't get the interactive nature of it set up correctly, and obviously then using it properly, you don't get the full benefit.
We also looked at, it wasn't just a procurement package that we were after. We were something that could service the full procure-to-pay life cycle, so including expenses, accounts payable, sourcing, those kind of elements all came in our search for what would work for our business. Ashley and I are probably two good communicators in our own right, so we sort of naturally gravitated towards each other when we were looking for solutions. And in our business, in the past, any software solution had been managed by our IT department, and really we took it upon ourselves to manage the expectation of the kind of solution that we needed. So we needed to be able to stand up in front of our stakeholders and said, this will work for these reasons, and we have accounted for this issue. So we had to really get to know our stakeholders and the people that were going to use the system and rely on the system and have to sell it to their staff, remembering that Ausdrill operated in the silo environment before. So we needed to look at or manage our expectations, and the way that we had done that at Ausdrill was we wanted to know what is the best practice in our environment. So Ausdrill as a business, we know mining services. So we don't really know how to buy things effectively. We don't really know how to process invoices effectively. They're just sort of back office functions in our mind that were added on in the need to know the mining services industry. So we had to look at, define what success is to our business, because that can become many things to many people, but as long as you know what the outset is at the beginning, you can work on that. So any system, automated or otherwise, would only be used by our business if the troops could see value in the system. So the guys on the field, the guys operating the drill rigs, they were probably our biggest stakeholder, because if they weren't going to use it, it was never going to succeed. It doesn't matter what system that you went with. So our focus, and it wasn't really glaringly obvious when we started, but we needed to make it easy for our people to use in their everyday purchases.
Now, what we've also done in that regard, we obviously looked at a few sort of tactical outlay options pretty much. So we looked at the big bang approach, which means rolling a mass of iPads and laptops out amongst all the users in the field. Now, we've got a very tech-hostile following within Ausdrill. So our guys don't necessarily respond well to new technology. They like the old way of doing things. The old saying, if it ain't broken, don't fix it, is quite prominent in this organisation. So what we did in the end, we decided to go for a more stealthy approach. So we've selected certain people in the field to start looking at the technology interface who are uptakers of new technology. So these guys like technology, they want to use it, they're all into iPads and they like the interface. So what we've done, we've got out of probably 50 users which we have to attack in a particular business where we're starting, we've got 3 or 4 who are very tech savvy. So these guys have brought these iPads in, and they've been really forthcoming in helping us develop the interface and the tool. So what's happened naturally now is that these people are telling everyone else how great this new system is and how much easier it is for them to do their work. We're actually getting requests now from people to have these things implemented in their area. So we've actually created a demand rather than pushing this out to the field, forcefully. So by that mechanism, we're actually getting people to want it and actually getting, sort of that uptake a lot faster. So we are rolling out systematically, site by site. We've got a training program developed. We've got obviously a very strict way a strict set of protocols on how we roll these things out. So we have been very deliberate in our approach, in our rollout approach. So it does take time, and obviously the benefits don't come as fast. But ultimately, what we want is a sustainable end product, which is going to be there for the long haul, not necessarily something we roll out and have to roll back because the uptake in the field just isn't there. So obviously each business is different, and obviously your customers or your people out in the field or the guys who are at the pit face of any operation, you assess who they are and what they're about before you go and set up a rollout strategy.
Yeah, now as Hugo alluded to in an earlier slide, there was a downturn in the mining industry. So obviously the focus then became on cost. So we were looking at the best pricing. Obviously service and availability needed to be negotiated. We needed a system that we could lock those pricing in or lock those KPIs in and measure them against. So you could have the best negotiators in the world, but if you don't have someone or something policing it, you're just going to blow out on maverick spend, and people will revert to the easiest path for them. So go down the road and speak to the guy that they already know. So our expectation was to move away from the requesters in the field telling the procurement people where they were going to buy items. We needed our procurement people having confidence on the best pricing, availability and service, and having that locked into a system. So our procure-to-pay process in our business is seen as a back office and non-revenue generating function. So it's a necessary evil. We needed to focus on changing this perspective, and sometimes you need to just own the view to be able to change it. So Ashley and I had a lot of meetings where we just had to be present and just had to listen to the feedback that we were getting. We had a lot of discussions between the two of us on what is just change noise and what are real issues. You can't fix the whole world, and if you're changing something fundamentally, you need to work out what is noise and what is real, because you can only try and fix what's real. And when we were rolling out our procure-to-pay solution, we had to manage our change process. So it's a whole procure-to-pay, and we thought, if you go with a big bang approach and one element of that goes wrong, then it leaves a bad taste in everybody's mouth. So we opted to do baby steps and just work with the business units in our group that were open to change, and in the business groups that weren't really open to change, identify stakeholders in that business that we could work with. So for us, baby steps ensured success. So as we alluded to earlier, the biggest point for us in controlling costs was getting our end users to accept the system. So what we did on that point of view is we then, the software solution we chose in the end was Coupa. And along with integrating that and setting that up with our businesses, we went through business by business. We also identified a Coupa user experience person. So that person had an operational focus and was quite tech savvy. So we then said to him, right, your job is to speak to the guys that are requesting and work out how it can be easier for them. So the next couple of slides will just show you how we have approached that in our business. So we had dedicated business unit ordering. So we can see here each of our businesses, you could see. The users, we set content groups up so they could only see their business, or they could see multiple businesses if they were cross-pollinating. We had links where we could punch out to our main suppliers, so we've given you a sample of a couple of suppliers there that we use quite a bit, and obviously each link related to each business unit. We had some order lists, so some things that are really off the cuff, not stuff that we order all the time. We just tried to make it easy for them to be able to click on and get used to. With the focus out on site, just wait for the next slide to come up, we've taken a particular business here. So our users could purchase by the mine site that they were at, or they could purchase by a particular asset. They could see quite quickly what is outstanding on our work orders, what are outstanding on our repairs, what freight have we got coming, what are some items that we order all the time that I just want to get in and get out. And that's what we wanted our end users to do. We didn't want them to get around and spend hours away from their revenue generating activities. We wanted them to use the system as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So the way that we developed our version of Coupa was really with an end user focus. We needed the in particular, some of our mine sites, we needed certain consumables on assets that were only to be used on that mine site. So our client dictated what sort of tyres that we could use on a vehicle, that kind of thing. So we then looked at, okay, well, our users know what our asset types are. They know what our make and models are. So a way we developed our ordering for our end users on that is we then showed them the makes and models that they could choose from. What that then enabled us to do is to push the cost control, because behind the scenes in this we had preferential suppliers based on best pricing, availability and service. We were then telling the end users where to buy from. There was no innuendo on using the guy down the street anymore, because that option was just taken away from them. So we were able to control any Maverick spend in our system by taking the option away, but they didn't really realise that the option was taken away. We also let our users purchase by asset number. So if they knew, they might know the make and the model, but they might also know the asset number that they're looking at. So they could click on that asset number and just see that, they can only buy certain tyres from a certain price from a certain supplier. They could only buy batteries from a certain supplier. So again, with that cost control focus, we were able to really lock down what our users could buy.
One of the big things with that is the reps permeating the field and creating Maverick spend. That's one of the big things. So I'm talking reps from vendors. That was quite rife in our business, and there were so many contact points. The whole situation was just a bit untenable. So this mechanism has basically pulled reps out of our business, because there's no way they can generate an order directly to a business without procurement approval. So it's made it easy for the guys. It's made it direct for the guys. The guys can get an order in sort of 20 minutes now, where it used to take them a few hours just to go through books and manuals. And you'll see on this page, we've gone down to a part level. We can use exploded diagrams. We can use, obviously, going to the next slide, Renee. We can basically got our parts manuals, our schematics, everything on there. We've got data sets which don't really relate to procurement, but guys can pull up an electrical schematic through Coupa. They can identify a part and go and write that part number in and obviously procure it. We've got breakdowns of assemblies here, so you can see here one of our drill strings. The guys can click on any of those parts, go into the specific section of that part and order either a component of that part or the part as a whole. So it just makes it really quick and intuitive to order parts, and as Renee said, it goes direct to the right vendor, which means we get cost control, we get compliance to contract, we get obviously the right quality of part. Maintenance can dictate and determine what goes into a rig now, whereas before there were so many inconsistencies in qualities like up here. So there's a lot of aftermarket vendors out there who have substandard quality, and that was permeating our fleet, which has now basically been stamped out.
What it also enabled us is obviously our business units became really involved in managing costs and trying to get the best costs available. So naturally they think, okay, it's the cheapest price, but it's not always that. I mean, the way that we have developed Coupa is we've given some production efficiencies back to the businesses, which they never really expected and never factored for. So we were able to get some wins with the business units to say, guys, look, it was taking you 30 minutes to do a requisition before, because you were going through the parts books and you were handwriting it out, and then you were taking a photo and sending it to purchasing. It now takes you a minute because it's all there. It's so quick and easy. So that was able to get some confidence in our business units on what we were trying to achieve, and we were demonstrating on how it was improving their cost base as well. So just little things it made, and it was also in the boom market. We were employing a lot of green type people out in the field that didn't understand that bit didn't really go with that bit, and there were quality issues around that. So we really just enforced the maintenance protocols by telling the users what goes with what. So again, that end user focus on us has really delivered much more than dollar for dollar savings. It's really given us a lot back in terms of efficiency and obviously better control out of that by increased revenue.
And once again, for consumable parts, you can see, I mean, this is just another example of how easy it is for the guys to find parts. So this is hydraulic hose and fittings. The guys can go to a category, they can go to a specific product. They see what they want, they can see a picture, they can see the writing. As I've said, some of the guys can't read, but they know the basics. And by being illiterate doesn't necessarily mean they can't read anything. They just know what they're looking at, and they know what it looks like in a catalogue, and the catalogues have been portrayed directly to Coupa. We've got our development team has pushed the product beyond its natural boundaries, and basically we've created something that's quite unique I'd say in our country here anyway. There's not another company using this style of interface, and what it's done is it's allowed us to basically be as efficient as we can possibly be in a lot of areas. So it's about getting guys to embrace the technology. That's the next step. So the easy bit is getting this set up and obviously putting the right resources behind that. And once you've put the right resource behind the setup, you can then reduce the amount of overall resource you have in procurement, because all the selection is done at the requisition stage. The selection is not done at the procurement stage, which is naturally the way it happens. In a written rec, you've got to decipher what the guy wants. You then have a choice to make, which vendor do you go to, whereas it's all done in Coupa before it even gets to the buyer. And in a lot of cases, where there's a contract in place, a price predetermined and a vendor predetermined, the purchase doesn't even see the buyer. It goes directly through to the approver, which then goes directly through to the vendor. So we've actually been able to dramatically reduce our amount of people in that buyer role, just purely by getting this level of automation sort of happening.
Yeah, I mean, we had buyers that would spend half their day just interpreting what someone had written on a requisition. So that efficiency has translated back to our procurement team, because we had some really excellent data entry people, and they had much more skills than that. So we've identified in our team the way that there are some people that can interpret parts a lot better. We've taken them away from the data entry side of it to more analytical. So that's then helped with dealing with our contract management, dealing with maverick spend, being able to talk back with our end users in the field to identify, okay, is that the right part? Does that suit the maintenance needs? Does that suit the operational needs? So they're really working more seamlessly with the business and not seen so much as a back office function anymore. And that was really important to us too, because it's obviously procurement is a big part of the way we spend money. So it was quite important that they understand the end outcome.
One thing I will add as well is when you're buying a cloud-based tool, which is the tool we selected, you've got to make sure that although it's cloud-based, it still is configurable to the level that your business can sort of meet these efficiency targets. So obviously we looked at the 4 or 5 major tools around the world, and we didn't really find. Obviously we've found how to do this within this tool, and obviously the tool is that malleable that we can actually make it work for our business. But some of the other tools in the market don't have that capability. So you've got to be very careful how you select the tool. You need something that's going to meet your business needs. So getting references from other businesses in your industry and out of your industry who have used these tools before is very, very important to make sure that you get what you want at the start, because once you've integrated the tool, it's very hard to back out and go down another path.
Yeah. And just finally, just on the cost control side of things and the revenue generating, our operational team are really now coming back to us and saying, right, well, we've got this, so how can we make shorter handover times with our cross shifts? So instead of them spending 2 days together before the team flies out and the other team flies in, can we use the production or the procurement system to really make a handover a lot quicker? So it's really now being driven by our operational team and embraced by them. So we're developing views in our system now on a guy can come back and look at his rig and go, okay, what has been ordered, what is outstanding, and and get a bird's eye view straight away and very, very quickly, which then allows them to get back drilling holes and making revenue. So it's working quite well with our operations and our safety point of view as well.
Okay, thank you very much for your comprehensive overview. You really went into a lot of detail with that. So, yeah, I'm sure all of the listeners are very grateful. I'm now going to hand over to Keaton from Coupa, and I just wanted to hear if he had any comments on what he's heard today from the perspective of a systems provider.
Thank you, Sally. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Coupa software, we're a single unified cloud-based platform with serving over 500 customers globally. And our mission really is to make sure that we drive measurable value as defined by savings to our customers. So as you heard in Ausdrill's story today, that on their journey to drive those savings in a cost-constrained environment. And what you're seeing in the slide here is some common themes or common value levers that we typically see with our customers that are looking to drive value out of their platform and their overall procurement transformation journey. And you could see the importance of aligning finances goals, so some of the things you had heard Renee talk about around driving profitability, giving more visibility and control into what's being bought, making sure that's being translated into the impacts to the operating business units budgets, as well as Ashley's goals of reducing cost and bringing more of that maverick spend under management. So finance and procurement are often some of the most important stakeholders in our procurement projects. But as you can see, it also takes other stakeholders across the business to drive that value. So other organizations, including IT, to help deliver that solution, as well as aligning with the executives in terms of what are those overall business goals and how are the business drivers that you've let out for these projects going to align and meet those business objectives. So at the end, it's about bringing all stakeholders along to that journey and making sure you're aligned on what you're trying to accomplish. And with that, I'll turn it back to Sally.
Okay, great. Well, it's coming up to, we've only got a few minutes left, so we've just got a couple of questions that have come through. So I'm just going to ask those and then we'll finish up today. So just for Renee, actually, this question. Procurement and finance in different businesses are not always aligned. How do you even start? How do you actually make that first step?
That's a great question, Sally. I would just start a conversation, I think. Find out who your procurement person is, or procurement, find out who your finance person is, and just go and say hi. You actually will be more aligned than you think. And if you just start a conversation about, okay, you know, I'm hearing this noise within my business, how can we help? Because apart from your payroll, procurement is the largest function that spends money in your business, and finance team need to be interested in and fascinated by that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's some good points there. We've only got one question left that we've got time for today, and I might do this one for Keaton. What are some typical best practices you've seen to ensure alignment between procurement and finance with procurement system implementations? And maybe just give one example that you can think of off the top of your head.
Sure. So I think there's two really critical ones. One that was touched by a little bit earlier today by Hugo, which is translating procurement savings into a language that finance can understand. So really bringing in alignment in terms of what are the overall objectives or value that we expect to achieve on that project, and how do we translate that into business outcomes that all the stakeholders can agree upon. So I think that's one key one. The other, I would say, is making sure that you have the right stakeholders aligned at the project level as well as the steering committee, so that everyone is bought into what the project is and what you're trying to accomplish.
Okay, great. Well, that actually brings us up to the 60-minute mark. So I really wanted to say a big thank you to Renee, Ashley, Keaton and Hugo for taking the time today to come in and have a chat to the group, and also for sharing some great insights about the importance of collaboration between procurement and finance to get some real results. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be putting this webinar on our Procurious website, and it will be in the learning section. and I hope you found it beneficial, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks.